Trash. Everywhere. I walked into the office Monday morning and froze completely. My keyboard was buried under greasy takeout boxes, cold French fries stuck to my computer mouse, and an empty strawberry yogurt cup balanced precariously on top of my monitor. Coffee grounds were scattered across my desk calendar, and there were crumpled napkins mixed with what looked like yesterday's lunch scraps. On top of this disgusting mess sat a bright yellow sticky note, written in thick black marker. If you work like garbage, you can work in it. My throat tightened as the humiliation hit me like a physical blow. People were staring from their cubicles all around me, but nobody was moving to help or even acknowledge what they were seeing. I reached for a clean napkin with shaky hands, trying to figure out where to even start cleaning this nightmare, when a familiar voice behind me said clearly, "What on earth is this?" I turned around slowly, my heart sinking. It was Arthur Keaton, our company CEO. His face was stone-cold serious as he took in the mess covering my entire workspace. My boss, Darren Cross, suddenly appeared from nowhere, stepping forward quickly and pretending to look surprised. The silence in the office cracked like breaking glass. Everyone had stopped typing and was watching this unfold like a train wreck they couldn't look away from. Mr. Cross stepped closer to my desk, putting on his best innocent face that I'd grown to hate over the past 6 months. "Oh, this? It's just a motivational exercise," he said with that familiar half-smirk that made my skin crawl. "Sometimes tough love works best for underperforming employees." The CEO didn't even blink at this explanation. His sharp eyes moved slowly from the trash pile to Cross, then settled on me with an unreadable expression. "In my office, both of you. Right now," he said, his voice calm but carrying the kind of authority that made grown men nervous. My fingers trembled as I pulled out my phone and quickly took several photos of my desk from different angles. Cross shot me a warning look that could have melted steel, but I didn't care anymore. Something inside me had finally snapped after months of this treatment. The other employees were pretending to work now, but I could feel their eyes following us. Some looked shocked and horrified. Others seemed relieved that someone in power was finally witnessing what Cross was really like. I saved the photos carefully and slipped my phone back into my pocket. Whatever happened next, I had concrete proof of this humiliation. The elevator ride to the executive floor felt like it lasted forever. Cross stood right beside me in the small space, his jaw clenched so tight I could hear his teeth grinding. I could smell his stale coffee breath as he leaned closer and hissed in my ear, "You better smile real pretty and tell him you're just being too sensitive about constructive feedback." I stared straight ahead at the illuminated floor numbers, watching them climb slowly. My heart was pounding hard, but it wasn't from fear anymore. This was pure, burning anger. I was furious because I knew exactly why I'd missed that campaign deadline, and it had nothing to do with being lazy or incompetent. I'd been covering for 2 coworkers who were out sick with the flu all week, working 16-hour days to keep 3 different major projects on track. Cross had promised to protect me when the deadline started looking tight, telling me not to worry about it. Instead, he'd thrown me completely under the bus and humiliated me in front of the entire office staff. The elevator finally dinged as we reached the top floor. Keaton's corner office was behind impressive glass doors that made everything feel official and intimidating. Cross straightened his expensive tie and put on his practiced fake smile. I took a deep breath and reminded myself that I had absolutely nothing to hide here. The truth was completely on my side, even if nobody else knew the whole story yet. Inside Keaton's spacious office, the air felt cold and still like a tomb. Expensive artwork hung on the walls, and floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city skyline. He gestured for me to sit in one of the plush leather chairs positioned across from his massive mahogany desk. Cross remained standing behind me, probably thinking it made him look more confident and in control of the situation. "Start with the note," Keaton said, his voice completely neutral, but somehow demanding immediate honesty. My voice came out much smaller than I wanted it to, but I forced myself to push through the embarrassment. I explained how I'd missed the campaign deadline by exactly 2 hours after working all week to cover for sick teammates. how I'd personally saved 2 major client accounts from canceling their contracts just last week. How Cross had called my work complete garbage, and apparently decided to make his point using actual trash from the office kitchen. Keaton's jaw flexed slightly as he listened to every word without interrupting. "Do you have any concrete proof of these claims?" he asked, leaning forward slightly. I pulled out my phone with hands that were finally steady. "Yes, sir, I absolutely do," I said, meeting his eyes directly. Cross shifted uncomfortably behind me, and I could practically feel his nervous energy radiating through the room. He probably thought I was bluffing or exaggerating, but I'd learned long ago to document absolutely everything when dealing with workplace bullies. I scrolled through my phone methodically, showing Keaton each piece of evidence I'd carefully collected. There were timestamps from my computer login system showing I'd worked until well past midnight every single night this week. Slack messages where Cross had specifically told me to hold off on submitting the campaign because leadership wants to completely reframe the whole deck first. A detailed email trail showing exactly how my project folder permissions had mysteriously vanished the night before the deadline was due. Keaton's eyes narrowed as he studied each screenshot I showed him, occasionally asking me to scroll back to double-check dates and times. "Your system permissions were actually removed?" he asked, genuine surprise creeping into his professional tone. I nodded confidently, feeling more sure of myself now that the facts were speaking for themselves. "Only someone in IT or a manager with administrative access can do that kind of change," I explained. Cross cleared his throat loudly from behind me. "There was a routine security review happening," he said quickly, his voice pitched higher than normal. "Just standard company procedure, nothing unusual." But Keaton was already pulling up something on his own computer, his fingers flying across the keyboard with obvious familiarity. After several minutes of intense typing and clicking, he looked up at Cross with an expression I couldn't quite read. "According to our detailed system logs, you personally removed her access privileges at exactly 11:47 p.m. The final deadline was midnight," he said quietly. Cross's face went completely pale in an instant. Cross immediately launched into a desperate, rambling speech about maintaining high-performance standards and tough love leadership techniques that build character. Every word that came out of his mouth made my stomach turn with disgust. I'd heard this exact routine from him before during our private meetings, but never in front of someone who actually had the real power to stop his behavior. Keaton listened to the entire speech without changing his expression even slightly, his hands folded calmly on his desk. When Cross finally finished his rehearsed explanation, Keaton stood up very slowly, his tall frame casting a shadow across the room. "Wait outside in the hallway," he told Cross firmly. "Both of you need to step out." Cross bristled like an angry cat whose territory was being threatened. "Arthur, I think we really need to discuss the bigger picture here," he started to protest. "Outside, now," Keaton repeated, his voice cutting through Cross's attempted objection like a sharp knife. Cross left first, his shoulders rigid with barely controlled anger and frustration. As I reached the heavy door, Keaton called my name softly. I turned back to face him. "You've been working here 3 years, right?" he asked casually. "Actually, 4 years this month, sir," I corrected him respectfully. He nodded slowly, like he was filing that important information away somewhere in his mental database. "Go directly to HR immediately. Tell them everything you just told me, word for word, and send me all those screenshots you showed me." For the first time all morning, my hands had completely stopped shaking. I finally felt like someone with real authority was actually listening to what had been happening to me for months. Cross was pacing in the hallway like a caged wild animal when I emerged from the CEO's office. The moment Keaton's door clicked shut behind me, Cross spun around to face me with fury burning in his eyes. "You just made the biggest mistake of your entire pathetic career," he hissed, stepping way too close to me in an obvious attempt at intimidation. "I trusted you, gave you incredible opportunities that you didn't deserve, and this is exactly how you repay my generosity?" His breath smelled like stale coffee mixed with something that might have been anger-induced acid reflux. I met his bloodshot eyes without flinching or backing down. "You did this completely to yourself," I said as quietly and calmly as I could manage. His face turned bright red, starting from his neck and spreading upward. "You're absolutely finished here?" he snarled. "I'll make sure everyone in this industry knows you're nothing but a troublemaker who can't handle basic constructive feedback." I started walking toward the elevator, but he actually grabbed my arm to stop me. "Nobody will ever hire you after I'm done destroying your reputation." A soft but clear voice suddenly interrupted his threat. "I recorded everything," the voice said. We both turned in surprise to see Kayla, one of our youngest interns, standing calmly by the water cooler with her phone held out. Her hands were visibly shaking, but her voice remained completely steady. "I recorded him dumping all that trash on your desk this morning, before anyone else arrived at the office." Cross dropped my arm like it was suddenly on fire. In an empty conference room down the hall, Kayla showed me the damning video on her phone with obvious nervousness. There was Cross at exactly 6 a.m., systematically dumping multiple office trash cans onto my desk like a vindictive child having a tantrum. He arranged the disgusting mess carefully and deliberately, even laughing quietly to himself as he placed the yogurt cup perfectly on top of my computer monitor. Then he wrote that horrible note, pressing down hard with his pen like he was enjoying every single letter he formed. My chest burned with a mixture of anger and vindication as I watched this proof of his calculated cruelty. "Why did you even think to record this?" I asked Kayla, genuinely curious about her motivation. She bit her lip nervously before answering. "He does stuff like this when nobody else is around to witness it. Little mean, petty things to people he doesn't like or wants to intimidate. I've been secretly documenting his behavior because I thought maybe someday someone would really need concrete proof." She scrolled through her phone, revealing other videos I'd never seen before. Cross, accidentally, knocking important papers off someone's desk during a meeting. Cross, deliberately deleting shared files from project folders when people were out sick. Cross making cruel, sarcastic comments about employees directly to their faces, then smiling afterward like it was all just harmless joking around. "I was planning to send all of these to HR anonymously," Kayla admitted. "But after seeing what he did to you today, I knew I had to speak up publicly and take a real stand." I felt completely overwhelmed with gratitude toward this incredibly brave young intern who had risked her entire future job prospects to protect other people. The HR office usually felt like a fortress designed to keep employees out, but today the door opened immediately when I knocked. I handed over everything: the screenshots, the timeline, my work logs, the emails where Cross had reassigned my permissions hours before the deadline. The HR manager, Beth Torres, kept nodding as she reviewed each piece of evidence. She took notes on a yellow legal pad, highlighting key dates and times. "This is very thorough," she said, which felt like the first compliment I'd gotten in months. "We'll need to investigate this properly." She paused, looking at me seriously. "I want you to know that retaliation is strictly prohibited. If anyone makes your work environment hostile because of this complaint, you report it immediately." I nodded, feeling a mixture of relief and nervousness. Part of me expected nothing to happen, like all the other times I'd tried to address problems with Cross. But another part of me dared to hope that this time might be different. After all, the CEO himself had witnessed the trash incident. Word spread through the office like wildfire. People who had barely spoken to me before suddenly appeared at my desk with their own stories about Cross. Tessa from accounting showed me a group chat where Cross had called me fragile and replaceable just last week. Omar from IT quietly slipped me a USB drive containing server logs that proved exactly when my permissions had been changed and by whom. "I pulled these for my own protection," he whispered. "Cross has been blaming IT for his mistakes for months." The stories kept coming. Late-night text messages demanding immediate responses to non-urgent requests. Public humiliation disguised as coaching. Deliberate exclusion from important meetings, and then criticism for being out of the loop. Emma from marketing told me how Cross had taken credit for her campaign ideas, then given her negative reviews for lack of innovation. I realized I wasn't his only victim. I was just the one who finally had witnesses and evidence. The pattern was bigger than I'd imagined, and it was all coming to light at once. At 3 p.m., something strange happened. My project folder suddenly reappeared in our shared drive like it had never been deleted. No explanation, no apology, just quietly restored access. But when I opened it, my blood ran cold. Someone had rearranged all my slides and added Cross's name to the title page as the primary author. He was planning to present my work as his own. Again. I'd seen him do this to others before, but experiencing it myself felt like a punch to the gut. This time, though, I was ready. I immediately copied everything to a private cloud backup, making sure to preserve the original timestamps and version history. I also took screenshots showing when the folder had been restored and how my name had been systematically removed from slides I'd created. If Cross thought he could cover his tracks and steal my work while making me look incompetent, he was about to learn a very expensive lesson. I was done being his doormat, and now I had the documentation to prove every single thing he'd done wrong. Keaton called me back to his office that afternoon. His expression was unreadable as I sat down across from his desk. "I've reviewed your evidence," he said simply, "but I need to understand the missed deadline. Walk me through exactly what happened." I took a deep breath and laid out the timeline. How 2 coworkers had called in sick with the flu. How Cross had assigned me their workload on top of my own. How he'd promised to extend the deadline, but then removed my access 30 minutes before the original cutoff. How I'd tried to call him but got voicemail. How I'd submitted everything first thing the next morning, only 2 hours late. Keaton listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes on a pad. "Who specifically removed your permissions?" he asked, though I suspected he already knew the answer. "The server logs show it was Cross," I said, at 11:47 p.m. He underlined something on his notepad twice. The meeting felt like a turning point, but I couldn't tell which way things were going to go. I watched through the glass walls as Keaton called Cross into his office. What started as a quiet conversation quickly turned heated. Cross's face flushed red as he gestured wildly with his hands. At one point, he actually pointed directly at me through the glass. Keaton never raised his voice, but his body language became more rigid with each passing minute. Other employees had noticed the commotion and were pretending to work while watching the drama unfold. After 20 minutes, Cross slammed his hand on Keaton's desk so hard that papers scattered. That's when security appeared. Not to escort anyone out, but to stand quietly in the hallway like punctuation marks. The meeting ended with Cross storming out of the office so fast that he nearly knocked over a plant. As he passed my desk, he leaned down and smiled, that fake smile I knew too well. "Hope you've been saving your money," he said, loud enough for others to hear. "You're going to need it." I didn't flinch this time. Let him make his threats. I had evidence, witnesses, and finally someone in power who was listening. The next morning, an email appeared in everyone's inbox that made the entire office go silent. "Mandatory all-staff meeting, workplace dignity and conduct review. Tomorrow 9 a.m. Attendance required." People stared at their computer screens, then looked around the office like they were seeing it for the first time. Some glanced at me with curiosity, others with sympathy. Cross wasn't at his desk yet, but his assistant looked nervous as she fielded phone calls. Tessa walked by my desk and mouthed, "Is this about yesterday?" I gave her the smallest shrug, but inside I was vibrating with nervous energy. This wasn't just a slap on the wrist or a quiet conversation. This was the company taking a public stand. Part of me was terrified that I'd bitten off more than I could chew. Another part of me felt something I hadn't experienced in years working under Cross. Hope. Real change might actually be possible. The old saying about sunshine being the best disinfectant was about to be tested, and I was ready to let the light in. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop, building a comprehensive timeline of everything that had happened. Screenshots organized by date, server logs cross-referenced with email timestamps, a detailed section titled "Additional Workload Due to Staff Illness" with specific examples and outcomes. I included the video Kayla had taken, the group chat screenshots from Tessa, and Omar's server logs proving the permission changes. By 3 a.m., I had a 20-page document that told the complete story. I'd never been good at speaking up for myself in confrontational situations, but I could organize facts like nobody's business. The document was clear, factual, and devastating. As I hit print, I felt a strange mixture of exhaustion and determination. Tomorrow, the truth would finally have its day in court. Cross had spent months making me feel small and incompetent, but numbers don't lie. Neither do timestamps, video footage, or server logs. I was about to fight back with the only weapons I'd ever needed: preparation and truth. At 9 a.m. sharp, the main conference room was packed beyond capacity. Keaton stood at the front, his expression serious as stone. He opened with 3 simple sentences that made the entire room hold its breath. We are not a humiliation culture. We are not a fear-based workplace. We are not a company where employees find trash on their desks. Every head in the room turned toward Cross, who was sitting in the back row with his arms crossed. Keaton invited me to the front to share my experience. My voice shook on the first word, but then something clicked into place. I wasn't just speaking for myself anymore. I was speaking for everyone who'd been bullied, humiliated, or silenced. The projector behind me displayed my carefully organized timeline: dates, times, screenshots, and patterns that painted an undeniable picture. I kept my language simple and professional, letting the facts speak for themselves. When I finished, the room was dead silent. Cross looked like he wanted to disappear through the floor, but there was nowhere left to hide. Keaton looked directly at Cross and asked, "Would you like to respond to these allegations?" Cross stood up slowly, his face flushed but defiant. He launched into a prepared speech about high-performance culture, accountability, and sometimes difficult conversations. He called the trash incident unconventional coaching and suggested I was being overly sensitive to feedback. A few people in the room shifted uncomfortably as he spoke. When he started talking about urgency and ownership, Keaton held up a hand. "Please stop managing synonyms," he said calmly. Several people couldn't suppress small sounds of amusement. Cross's face went from red to purple. Then Keaton delivered the words that changed everything. "Effective immediately, you are suspended pending a full investigation into these allegations." Cross's chair screeched as he pushed it back violently. He stared at me like I had personally destroyed his entire world. In a way, I suppose I had. The Emperor had no clothes and everyone could finally see it. Justice might be slow, but it was finally coming. That afternoon, Omar appeared at my desk with information that made my head spin. "You need to see this," he said quietly, pulling up something on his laptop. He discovered a hidden admin account that had been used to change my file permissions, an account created 6 months ago and tied to an email address none of us recognized. But the recovery phone number matched the last 4 digits on Cross's business card. My stomach dropped. "This wasn't just about yesterday," Omar explained. "This account has been used to mess with people's files for months, always targeting employees who had conflicts with Cross." I stared at the screen, pieces of a larger puzzle clicking into place. The missed deadlines that seemed to happen right before performance reviews. The mysterious system glitches that only affected certain people. The technical difficulties that somehow always made Cross's critics look incompetent. This wasn't workplace bullying. This was systematic sabotage. Cross hadn't just been a bad manager. He'd been actively destroying people's careers while covering his tracks. The scope of his misconduct was far worse than anyone had imagined. Tessa from accounting knocked on my desk the next morning with a manila folder that would blow everything wide open. "I've been digging through vendor payments," she said nervously. "Look at this." Inside were invoices for a consulting firm that Cross had been pushing on everyone for months. The rates were 40% above market value, and the company owner's name was suspiciously similar to the email alias tied to that ghost account. "It gets worse," Tessa continued, showing me more documents. "Look at the payment authorization signatures." Every single invoice had been approved by Cross personally, bypassing the normal review process. The consulting firm had received over $200,000 in payments over the past year for work that could have been done internally or by cheaper vendors. I felt dizzy as I realized what we were looking at. This wasn't just harassment or sabotage. This was fraud. Cross had been using his position to funnel company money to what appeared to be his own operation. No wonder he'd been so desperate to keep people quiet and discredit anyone who asked too many questions. At 6 p.m., just as I was packing up to leave, my phone rang. It was Beth from HR, and her voice sounded strained. "I need to inform you that we've received an anonymous complaint about your conduct," she said carefully. "Someone alleges that you've been accessing company files without authorization and sharing confidential information with other employees." My hands went numb. Cross was trying to flip the script, making me look like the wrongdoer. But I was ready for this. I pulled out my laptop and opened my carefully organized evidence folder. "Beth, I have the exact email where Cross instructed me to route documents through his personal account for quick edits," I said. "I have the timestamps, the headers, everything." I sent her the screenshots immediately. "Within minutes?" she called back. "These emails show he specifically asked you to use external channels," she said, sounding relieved. "The anonymous complaint appears to be retaliatory. We'll be documenting this as additional evidence of misconduct." Cross's desperate attempt to destroy me had just made his own situation worse. He was sinking fast and taking everyone down with him who tried to help. The next morning brought visitors I'd never seen before. Serious-looking people in expensive suits carrying briefcases. Keaton met me at the elevator before I could even reach my desk. "The board wants to hear your story directly," he said, his expression unreadable. My heart started pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. In the boardroom, 5 stern faces looked at me expectantly as I set down my printed timeline and took a shaky breath. I told them everything exactly as it had happened, step by step, without drama or embellishment. Just facts in chronological order, the way I might explain a project timeline to a client. When I mentioned the ghost account and the suspicious vendor payments, several pens stopped moving at once. The board members exchanged glances that seemed to communicate volumes. One woman asked quietly, "Do you have documentation of the financial irregularities?" I nodded and handed over Tessa's folder. The room fell completely silent as they reviewed the invoices and payment authorizations. I had the feeling that Cross's problems were about to get much, much bigger than workplace harassment. I was walking back to my desk when I found Cross waiting by my cubicle with a cardboard box in his hands. His face was pale, and his hands were shaking slightly. "They can't just fire me," he said too loudly. "My contract has protections. I'll sue this company into the ground." Other employees had stopped working to watch this final confrontation. I looked at the box, the universal symbol of sudden unemployment, and felt a strange mix of satisfaction and pity. "If you sue," I said quietly, "they'll have to explain the ghost account and the vendor payments in court. Public record." His face went white as he realized I knew about the financial fraud. "You have no idea what you've started," he whispered, but the fight had gone out of his voice. "I know exactly what I've started," I replied. "I started telling the truth." He looked around the office at all the faces watching him, then picked up his box and walked toward the elevator. I never saw him again after that day, but I heard he withdrew his threats to sue. Smart choice, considering what we'd uncovered. At 4 p.m., the email everyone had been waiting for finally arrived. Personnel update. Effective immediately. Cross had been terminated for cause. The suspicious vendor contracts were frozen pending investigation. An external audit firm was being brought in to review all financial processes. The office went completely quiet as people read the announcement, then gradually began to buzz with whispered conversations. Some employees looked relieved, others seemed shocked that it had actually happened. Kayla squeezed my hand so hard it hurt, her eyes bright with tears. "You did it," she whispered. "You actually did it. But I knew I hadn't done it alone." It had taken Kayla's brave video recording, Omar's technical expertise, Tessa's financial detective work, and Keaton's willingness to listen and act. Cross had created his own downfall through years of misconduct. I'd just been the one to finally shine a light on it. Sometimes the truth needs help finding its way to the surface, but once it emerges, it's impossible to ignore. Justice might be slow, but it was finally here. 3 days later, Keaton called me into his office one last time. "I want to offer you Cross's position," he said without preamble. "Team leader, significant raise, budget authority, and I want your input on developing a new workplace dignity policy. I sat quietly for a moment, thinking about all the nights I'd gone home feeling defeated and worthless. All the times I'd swallowed my pride to keep a peace that wasn't really peace. I'll take the position, I said finally. But I want something else too. He waited. Promote Kayla to full-time. She showed more integrity and courage than most people twice her age. Keaton smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from him through this whole ordeal. Done. Anyone else? I thought about Omar's technical skills and Tessa's attention to detail. Give me a month to evaluate the team properly. I want to build something better than what we had. He nodded approvingly. That's exactly why I'm giving you this opportunity. Lead with the same principles you used to bring down Cross. Truth, evidence, and treating people with dignity. A week later, I stood in the same conference room where Cross had humiliated me, but everything felt different now. Sunlight streamed through the windows onto a table where Kayla was setting up her new laptop as our junior analyst. Tessa had volunteered to help with our team budget oversight, and Omar was explaining our new file security protocols. Keaton opened our first official team meeting with words I'll never forget. Excellence without humanity is just cruelty with better results. I looked around at these people who had risked their jobs to support the truth and felt something settle in my chest that I hadn't experienced in years. Not triumph, not even relief, but quiet confidence. I would never let anyone make me feel small again. And if they tried, I had learned that documentation, courage, and good people are more powerful than any bully. My desk was clean, my team was strong, and my conscience was clear. Cross had tried to bury me under trash, but instead, he just revealed how much stronger I was than either of us had ever imagined. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you becomes the doorway to the best thing that could happen.